Hello, I am here. Wait 1 second. The show of a lifetime. This is the show of a lifetime with nobody else there. Toot, 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 toot. I decided to change my shirt last minute. Just felt, I don't know. Didn't like how it was buttoned, but hey, let's see. Does it mess my hair up? Nah, we're good. We good, people. Okay, who is ready for an awesome live stream? What is going on, guys? It is Tom Radigan. Welcome. And I think is this the first video with my new glasses that are blue? Interesting. Is anybody interested? I don't know. But today, like I said, what it says in the thumbnail, we are gonna talk about the band's Stage Fright album and Cahoots. So let's just, before we go any further, let's go on social media and just, like I'm gonna spread the word. And yeah, no, here we go. This is what we gotta do. We gotta promote. We gotta promote. We always have to promote. That's what I'm doing. That is what. All right. So now that the promotion is out there pretty much, let's talk about the band's Stage Fright album and Cahoots. First, we're gonna talk about Stage Fright, but let's just give a little, intro of, the band. I've already talked about the band on my channel before. I've talked about their two famous albums, which are Music from Big Pink and the band. If people just listen to, classic albums or not a huge fan of the band, they probably know those two albums because those are their most legendary albums. And also too, they were on I think, or I don't know if they were on the 2020 edition of Rolling Stones top 500 album, five out of five. Oh my god, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, like on the top 500 albums of all time. In 2020, I know they were on the top 500 albums in 2004. So let's see. But all right. So yeah, like I've talked about, the band is, of course, they were definitely a powerhouse of, five talented musicians. Equally, I've said this before about, like there comes a time and place with a few bands where really every member stands out. Usually there's one person that stands out more than the others, but in this case, all five of them equally had talent that you can over yeah you can't overlook, you can't underestimate anything they've done. Really, you just can't. I mean, like they had five members: Robbie Robertson on guitar, Levon Helm on drums and vocals, Richard Manuel on piano and vocals, Rick Danko on bass and vocals, and Garth Hudson, who was the multi instrumentalist who carried them pretty much through organ. But also, too, another thing, most of these guys were multi instrumentalists already, most of the members. I mean, there are sometimes instruments where, for instance, like Richard Manuel, he plays saxophone a few times. He plays piano a few times, drums a few times. Same with Rick Danko, he can play fiddle and all that. Levon Helm played drums, mandolin, and all that. And so yeah, so when it came time to do their first two albums, they were, because they were a backing band playing with Ronnie Hawkins. I did a video about Ronnie Hawkins as well. And then of course they played with Bob Dylan while he was going electric and all that. So when that fiasco of him playing at the folk festival in 1965, yeah, the Newport Folk Festival, where everything kind of went to shit for with his fans because everybody loved him as a folk musician and they just weren't a fan of this rock music that he was playing. So and the only person that really was okay with having the band be in his backing band was, Bob Dylan. He thought this was, great. He liked what they were doing, electric, and none of the audience really liked what they were doing. But of course, they came around a few years later, and yeah, no. So then, of course, then they, got their solo career going by doing music from Big Pink, which was up in Woodstock, New York. Then they did their self-titled album, The Band, and like I said, I've already talked about those albums on my channel, so I'm not going to go too into them. Um, and we're now talking about their third album. So the first album was released in '68, the second album was '69, the third album was released in 1970, and it was Stage Fright. And now I have two actually, copies of this record. This was actually my dad's record that he got years and years ago. My dad was a huge, record connoisseur. He like, really, what do you call it? Had a lot of records in his file cabinets that he put over the years. We collected so many of them, and when because he originally lived out, with my grandfather, and then these records moved from when my parents lived in the city, and then when they lived in the Queens, and then when I moved out to Long Island with my family and all that. Now, you see, little family history. Hey. But yeah, so these records have been with my father for a long time. I think he got these in the '70s, but my dad would probably be able to tell you directly when he got them, but probably around high school, college, stuff like that. So this would be back in the '70s. He got this, and if this is the case, they are in good condition. If this record was bought in the '70s, like it's still in pretty good, conditions, to tell you the truth. The photo, the record itself, but I also got because in 2020 was the 50th anniversary of Stage Fright, and they made a 50th anniversary edition. And so here's that right here, which is Stage Fright 50th anniversary. Now notice too that so the original track listing right here is Strawberry Wine, Sleeping, Time to Kill, Just Another Whistle Stop, Allegory, The Shape I'm In, the W.S. Walcott Medicine Show, Daniel and the Sacred Harp, Stage Fright, and The Rumor. So that's the original track list. And on the 50th anniversary, the track listing is a little different. It's W.S. Walcott Medicine Show starts it off, then The Shape I'm In, Daniel and the Sacred Harp, Stage Fright, and The Rumor. So basically, side one on the original track listing kind of is most of side two on the original track listing is part of side one for the 50th anniversary edition, and most of the stuff on the second part are from the first are from part one from the first when it was released. And no. So on part two for the 50th anniversary edition, it's Time to Kill, Just Another Whistle Stop, Allegory, Strawberry Wine, and Sleeping. Of course, I think I prefer the original track listing. I think that works better. With Strawberry Wine started as like kind of like a 50. It kind of sounds like a '50s type of rock style. Just a old fashioned rock and roll song. Kind of, it sounds like Levon Helm. Carries it pretty well with his voice. Of course, Levon had an incredible voice. I mean, the thrill that he brought to the band's music and their catalog, like, oh my god, the way he would just just like really just like lay out on those vocals, like, oh my god, he just did such a great job with it. And of course, he's very iconic as time goes on. Elton John and Bernie Taupin's song Levon was based on his name and all that, and as rock and roll goes, he is probably one of the best white soul singers out there, along with his other two lead singers on the band, which are Richard Manuel and Rick Danko. I don't know if I've ever really said it like this before, but if I'm being really transparent here, I'm gonna go on record and say Richard Manuel is probably one of the best, soul singers out there. White soul singers, I put him up there with Levon Helm, of course, from the band, but even other soul singers like John Fogerty from Creed's Clearwater Revival, Pigpen from Grateful Dead, and Felix Cavalier from the Rascals. I think would maybe be my top five white soul singers. I think at this moment, Rick Danko as a singer was not so much like he brought a lot of emphasis in his voice and a lot of just character, but he wasn't really, his voice didn't have as much soul as Manuel Helm. He brought a little bit more of a folk style to it, but also just a regular pop and rock style in his voice too, and I think that's the thing that works so well. But another interesting fact is about this album is that so it was their third album, and their first two albums were produced by John Simon, who was also kind of seen as the sixth additional member, considering he would play, some brass instruments on their records and all that. And he is actually featured on the WS Walcott Medicine show. But Another thing too is the band decided to produce this album themselves, but they had a little help from engineer Todd Rundgren. Yeah, who actually became more big as time goes on and had a solo career himself. Yeah, Todd Rundgren. Am I saying his name right? I think I said Rundgren. Tom Rundgren. See, this is what happens when you go live. You can't clear up your mistakes. Remember that. See. You can't. But you're gonna have to acknowledge it. See, sooner or later you're gonna eventually have to acknowledge your mistakes. And but hey, and then Glyn Johns also does the mix down, right? Right. Oh my God, yeah, another well known session engineer. I mean, he worked with the Beatles on the last few records. I mean, he's even featured in the Get Back documentary. Some people have even been calling him the sixth Beatle. He's worked with them. He's worked with the Eagles. Glyn Johns, well known session musician. I mean, session engineer and producer too. Yeah, and yeah, it was recorded at Woodstock's Playhouse, which was apparently, from what I saw from a documentary interview with Todd Rundgren, he talks about that. With it was that they were, I think no, what it was, yeah, no, so it was just, I don't know what documentary it was, but it was a snippet I saw where they were talking about how when they recorded this record they used yeah, Woodstock Playhouse to record it, which was like this, of course, like the big, auditorium, and like, well, it's an arena type thing, it's a stage, and they recorded it on the stage, and all that. So I mean, it wasn't a live album, but that's just how they recorded it. I remember that's what he said. And at first, I was like, "What? Really? They recorded it there? Like, well, Woodstock Playhouse?" And no, I mean, that's phenomenal when you think about it. And yeah, no, I mean, it's incredible. Yeah, and yeah, no, but yeah, like, because I'm trying to think, like, because like, of course, there was the famous Woodstock Festival, but I don't think was that the I don't think that's where it was played. No, I think that's just a place in Woodstock. Because like, even though the band lived in Woodstock, they were more around West Sagittarius, so that wasn't near Yaster's farm, which was where the actual Woodstock Festival happened. Which was, of course, the biggest festival of 1969, which the band were at. And another thing too was they were actually the most, well paid act. Yeah, they were the highest paid act there, too. Apparently, I guess they had some advantage, living in Woodstock, New York. But yeah, and the thing that I think is so influential of the band and just so interesting about them is their sound. I mean, there wasn't as many groups that sounded like them in the late '60s. They were really at this type of revolution. With like I mean the band, and I'd say a few people were at this type of revolution, like the band, and same with Crosby, Stills and Nash. With Crosby, Stills and Nash's harmonies, which I've talked about them, and the videos where I've talked about the band's albums. They were known for their harmonies, and that was it didn't sound anything like what was going on that time with like guitars and all that, and like Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd. And that's sort of similar with the band. It's not like they were with their songwriting. It wasn't really like songs that were protest songs per se. They were more like storybook songs. They were kind of songs. The sounds you heard, they kind of sounded like they were going back in time a little bit, not like even though they were a lot of artists at the time were trying to stay current, trying to stay relevant, and not that they weren't. It was just their sounds and their influences came back from so many years, and they kind of used that to sound like an old-fashioned record. I mean, some people say like music from Big Pink can sound like stuff like, with for instance, like The Wait could sound like songs that could have been done 50 years prior. But you know I think that's the thing with, musicians when you're creating something. Some people will say you're sounding like you're going backwards in time. Sometimes you're sounding like you're going forward in times. But with this, it's like it's definitely current music by having a lot of old fashioned style. in there. And for instance, too, I mean, a lot of like, Robbie Robertson, Levon Helm, they were all influenced by, old blues musicians, I mean, of course, the Muddy Waters takes a lot of influence, takes a lot of inspiration from them, they have a lot of inspiration from Muddy Waters, Sonny Boy Williamson, also too, I mean, yeah, Howlin' Wolf, Little Walter, a lot of like, the blues sound from Chess Records, a lot of stuff from the Mississippi Delta, even going back to Robert Johnson. That's a lot what makes up the band's music. Of course, there are some folk stuff that makes up their music as well. There really are a mix of folk and blues, but I would say a lot of you could tell a lot of the blues interest. I mean, like even like with somebody like Garth Hudson right here, who was a multi instrumentalist who was basically a musical prodigy when he was a child. Robbie Robertson is claimed in the documentary Once Were Brothers that you know he had an understanding of music that was like Muddy Waters and Beethoven in the same sense. And you could totally tell that of how Garth Hudson plays the organ and his instrumentation. But yeah, no. So let's dive into a little bit of the songs. Then we'll go into the songwriting throughout and all that. And of course, it's well known that like I said, each of these guys were equally talented and they all had their roles. Levon Helm, Rick Danko, and Richard Manuel were the primary lead singers of the group. And while Robertson and Garth Hudson would hold the fort basically of just laying down the rhythm section, the instrumentation and all that. But Robbie Robertson was really like the songwriter. And of course, there's this whole debate and a lot of people apparently, well, Levon Helm and people who defended Levon Helm kind of have claimed that, it's more of like, that Robbie Robertson ripped off, the band and all that. And of course, you're either, at this point, like you're either Team Robbie or Team Levon. Of course, there are fans that will be like, oh, Robbie ripped everybody off. But, Levon, if you think about it, was the only one that was really saying that, they just, even though they all kind of did work on a song together, but the only difference was Levon, Rick, Richard, and Garth more arranged the songs when Robbie really did write the songs, which was having the lyrics down and the music, but just when recording, they all kind of, played a part in that. So there was a lot of input from all five of them. It wasn't just Robbie Robertson. And I think that's what Levon Helm was trying to say about it, And but I think the thing too is that the debate is as well, an arranger isn't the same thing as a songwriter. So when it comes to getting songwriting royalties or any type of credit that a songwriter has, the arranger doesn't have to get credit. I mean, sometimes the arranger can give credit for it, but in this case, Robbie Robertson didn't give credit to the other guys. And that like, can be a mutiny when it comes to bands and all that. But from what I've heard and from what I've heard about the debate, it's more of Levon was the one that was really saying that. And a lot of people were saying that he just grew bitter over the years and kind of took his anger out on Robbie Robertson, which is sad in a way because they were when they were playing with Ronnie Hawkins, they were, Levon was playing with Ronnie Hawkins first, and then Robbie Robertson joined, and then the others joined later on. So, they knew each other, when they were teenagers and all that. And, they had this very close relationship. When it comes, yeah, because like when it comes to bands, there's always like two artists that have like the closest relationship. And a lot of people would say, yeah, like it was like Levon and Robbie had that type of relationship, of partnership when it came to songwriting. Like Robbie could write the song, Levon could arrange it. But I mean, of course, like I said, there's a lot of chemistry you see with all of the artists, like even like Richard Manuel and Rick Danko. When Richard Manuel sings lead and the harmonies Rick Danko has, and even vice versa. Like for instance, on the song "Time to Kill," features that with Rick Danko taking the lead and Richard Manuel accompanying him with the harmony. And Richard Manuel, I think to me is it's honestly such a sad story. And this, I mean, the thing too is Richard Manuel died over 30 years ago, and I think what's sad about it, I think with me with Richard Manuel is that you know this guy had so much soul. He some people consider him the lead singer of the band. When you look up articles about him or you read biographies, he's considered, like actually the lead singer, because when you look at the first album, Richard Manuel was singing most of the songs. But as time went on, he kind of was seen more as a side person, and it was Levon that was taking more of the lead, and the same with Rick Danko and all that. I mean, Levon had more, I think, star presence when people think of the band. Sometimes the first name that comes to mind are Levon Helm, maybe Robbie Robertson, maybe even Rick Danko. But for some reason, I always feel like Richard Manuel always got overshadowed, and maybe in the possibility due to his death, people also didn't really get a chance to really acknowledge or know how great he was as not just as a musician, but with his voice. Like, for instance, like, songs like Sleepin', that's just the second track, and also too just another whistle stop, really just show you his vocal range, just like the kind of like his calm, soothing voice on Sleepin' just really, just it's like it's not like it's like you forget you're listening to music, but you're just like, you're just entertained. You're like, oh, it just, he keeps you hooked, and yeah, and also too, like I said, just another whistle stop's a little bit more of a catchy, upbeat song, and also, of course, probably his most well-known song on the album is "The Shape I'm In," which is probably known as a signature band track. And me and my girlfriend got a chance to go see this tribute band of the band performing, and they did a phenomenal job. And when they did "The Shape I'm In," they said this is a good song that relates to the pandemic. And yeah, it's the truth. Boy, you don't know the shape I'm in. But what's more interesting, I think, about this song "The Shape I'm In" is the history of how, like I said, Robbie Robertson really wrote most of the tracks. He's credited on all the tracks. However, Richard Manuel does get a songwriting credit on, I think it's what do we call it? He gets a credit on "Just Another Whistle Stop," and I believe "Sleepin'," and Levon Helm gets a credit on "Strawberry Wine" as a co-writing credit with Robertson. And this is actually the last time we see Richard Manuel having a songwriting credit on an album, because like I said, Robertson was the sole songwriter, really, or seen as that way. But Richard Manuel in the early days was also writing his own songs that got on music from Big Pink. Like on music from Big Pink, when you see his name as a songwriter, you just see his name, and Robbie Robertson's name's not on that. And that's like probably the only record that you just see Richard Manuel's name on it. But yeah, no. So as of course time went on, Robertson took more control in the songwriting. And I think also too, he claims that it wasn't by choice. It was just, what was well known is too, when like for instance, like Levon, Richard and Rick kind of all got really addicted to drugs, alcohol, and that took, a real big effect on their music. And a lot of people will say that you know, um decreased a lot of the creativity and input that Richard Manuel had to the group. And so no, that's sad when you think of it. But he was still able throughout his time to be a hell of a vocalist. And like "The Shape I'm In" definitely proves that, because like I said, when Robertson wrote the song, and he wrote it about how Richard was as a person. Like this was kind of like Richard's theme song in some way. And it showed like his rough type of style. He had a very like kind of rough, I think, upbringing. Apparently, I mean, it was well known that he had an issue with alcoholism. If you see the documentary "Once Were Brothers," it's well known that he had that trouble throughout the time as the band. But even it went back with him as a kid, when he was I think like a teenager, when he met Robbie Robertson claimed that when he met Richard, he was drunk and all that, so you know that's the thing too. When you see this stuff about people who have like alcoholism issues, they're usually already having an issue. While they're young, it's usually it, like kind of started there. But yeah, no. So we've got that. So we've talked about "Time to Kill," which is basically like the harmonies with Rick Danko, Rich Manuel, which was released as a single, but I feel like not as well known as "The Shape I'm In," which I think is like the main signature track on this album. And the same with and the same with another track, which is "Stage Fright." Yeah, which let's talk about Stage Fright actually. That is the title track of the song, and oh my god, um, Rick Danko, I feel like didn't get as much credit as vocalist yet, as because it was either Richard or Levon that would take the lead on a lot of the well-known songs from the first two albums. But when it came time to do this song, Rick just takes the lead on this. It's a real. What's interesting too is when Robertson wrote it, he actually was thinking this would be a good song for Manuel, and you could see why you think Richard Manuel could sing this song. After hearing him and Danko's vocal style, they're kind of similar in some ways, but he thought that Danko's trembling type of voice worked with the character in this story, which is about a guy who's got this fame and fortune, but he is suffering from stage fright now when he's performing, and it also I think is based on Robbie Robertson's own type of stage fright when they started performing together as the band again, because this was the first time they were performing in a few years. The last time they performed was with Bob Dylan, and they were getting booed everywhere and getting shit thrown at them all the time. So yeah, like so that kind of features so that kind of like embarks that into there, and it's this real journey of the song when you hear it, and like even the way the piano starts, and then how the rest of the band comes in, and you could just tell how in sync they are, and that's why I feel like they work together well as such, like all five of them equally as musicians. They're just you can just tell like the in sync quality with them. They like you could tell their brother their brotherhood, their friendship already is kind of shown in this song, like how they're able to these guys who knew each other for over 10 years and played together and were still playing together, and then how Danko can just go right into it with his trembling voice, and then just going now deep in the heart of a lonely kid, and then yeah, and how the music just like just accompanies him pretty well, and then lines like they gave this proud boy his fortune and fame, and even like his falsetto I love as well, like they gave his proud boy his fortune and fame, like you really feel like him like embracing that character, with the man with the see the man with the stage fright, and he got caught in the spotlight, but when we get to the end he's gonna start all over again. And yeah, no, but yeah, I have a friend who I interviewed on this channel, Anthony Sabino, who's a musician, who talks about how he loves the band and he loves the song Stage Fright. And yeah, I mean Stage Fright of course is just phenomenal when you think of it. And also another thing too is if anybody has seen The Last Waltz, because if you're a huge band fan, then you know the Martin Scorsese film The Last Waltz, which captured their last concert in 1976. And in the film, they have a version of Stage Fright. And when you hear that version, and like I tell you how in sync they are, they're so in sync in that version too that the live version I think is actually better than the studio version. However, when you think about it, and when you really like think more in deep, and you realize, oh my god, like that's the last time ever they played that song together, because it was the last concert, and that was the last time they all five were all played together. And yeah, like when you think about it, it kind of you get more chills thinking about how great that version was, but it's the last time they all five ever played that song together again. So that's something to be said about it. And yeah, no, like I mean, honestly, to tell you the truth, I mean, like I could go on hours talking about the band's vocal style, but even like just really like I said, this is a song that really kind of showed what Rick Danko could do as a vocalist and all that, and it became Rick Danko's best known song with them and all that, and I just love how he carries it throughout, and the verses just work so well. When I work out, I run to the song. I drive to the song. I mean, just and also too, like I said, the intro with the piano, like bum bum ba dum bum 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 ba dum bum bum bum, and then how like the drums kick in, and then the guitar like dun 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 dun, like you can just really feel like all five of them just into the music, and then it just going more and more to like the dun 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 All right. Yeah. That's done. I'm done with that part. Geeking out or having those nerdgasms, I guess that you can call it. I mean, listen, I am a huge music geek, and I guess real appreciator when it comes to this type of rock and this type of decade, and especially with this group. I mean, honestly, it's become a joke with me and my friends that it's like, up here we go, is talking about the band, and I really got more into their music during the pandemic, and I think it's a real nostalgic reason, I think, as well, because there's just something about it, of I think the memories now I have of going through this weird time of nobody knowing what to do. With the pandemic, we're kind of all in this strange type of, thing, staying at home, not knowing what's going to happen next. And then it's the real, honestly, the best time to listen to this music is when you are at a state of vulnerability, and you don't know what to expect. This is a good time to hear what the band has to offer. And now I've listened to all of their albums, know basically most of their songs. And Yeah, I think that's something to be said too. Even when I was going up to college last year and I was away from my family, listening to their music even more, got more of a kind of a connection. And and then watching the last waltz, I mean, you really, feel this kind of, it's like, we never know these musicians. We never know these people as people, and sometimes we never will, and they always say never meet your heroes, but like I said, you can really feel like their brotherhood after watching documentaries, listening to their records, and even watching The Last Waltz. Like this connection these five guys had with each other that they wouldn't have had with anybody else. They were something that they all could understand. And like anybody outside really didn't understand what they were going through. But other songs I think that really capture this record, I think, are like I've talked about, Levon has some good songs on this, Strawberry Wine, very like an old fashioned 50s rock song. Like I said, I feel that it's like that. All of Glory is probably like maybe my least favorite track on the album. It's very soft, little too preachy in my opinion, I feel like. But the song that I like with him on it, which features both Richard and Rick, which is I love the type of songs that they do when all three of them sing together on it. And basically every most of their albums have that, where all three of them sing on at least one song or sometimes two songs. And in this song, it's The Rumor, which ends the album, and it's not as well known as the other songs, even though it's the last track. And all three of them have a turn singing it, and the opening with the music, but also too, how all three of them just take a turn at a verse with Rick Danko starting, and then Levon Helm coming in, and then Richard Manuel coming in with the chorus like "Close your eyes," and he's just very calm with it, going into more of his lower vocal style, like "Lay down your head," and then yeah, and then like even hearing like harmonizing at some points just works so well. And like the song is really like, yeah, it's like 5 minutes, and it's this real story. And then how like they'll sing, and then the other takes a turn to sing, and then they come back and sing again. And it's works really well. And another thing I really like too is another song is Daniel and the Sacred Harp, and that's done by Levon and Richard, both of them sing that. And It's this really story about this guy named Daniel who has this sacred harp, and going from the sea of Gallery, and like I said too, of course I love Levon's voice, and his vocal style, and and he's a great soul singer for the band. But really I feel like Richard Manuel always gets overlooked on, and whenever I listen to like, it's great when you hear Levon sing, and it's great. He's got some really great soul whenever you hear Levon just wail it out. But then once Richard comes in, and then like really just takes like control, and just it's like when you hear like him do like stuff like 3 years I've waited patiently, and it's like ooh, like you really like kind of like need to like kind of like dissect that, and then just really hear more of the story as time goes on. I mean, I feel like also too Richard's type of voice when you hear him sing, his presence is so powerful that you really like hear the words of what he's saying and you realize, oh, where is the Sia Gallery? Or okay, so he waited patiently for 3 years, and stuff like stuff like that, But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a fun record, even with his song "Just Another Whistle Stop," which is the fourth track. Uh, that's another great one. I've talked a little bit about. I've talked about W.S. Walcott's Medicine Show. Oh wait, no, I did not talk about W.S. Walcott's Medicine Show. Now that is like a real fun tune that Levon and Rick take a lead at. And also too, the thing is, like I talked about, like the connection Levon and Robbie had together, but Levon had this real connection with Rick Danko, and it's shown on some songs that they've done together. But one I'd say that really works well is on this album, which is W.S. Walcott Medicine Show, which is basically almost like, if you think about it, sounds like kind of like the Beatles' Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band type of song. And it's about this a carnival medicine show that, yeah, it's a medicine show that Levon knew as a child and all that, and he would talk to Robbie about that, and so Robbie captured that in the lyrics of the song. And yeah, and it's just about these types of characters you'll see. When your arms are empty and got nowhere to go, come on now and catch a show. And just talks about like what you kind of see in those like traveling, like kind of minstrel, shows, like those types of carnival acts. And yeah, and both like Danko and Helm just carry that song so well too, and especially at the end how they keep repeating with WS Walcott's Medicine Show, and then yeah, and then how there's like the little instrument break and they just keep going back with it. Like they really just like nail this song. But yeah, so that's what I gotta say about this record. I mean, it's not like when it comes to this one, it's not as looked highly upon as like the other two band records, which was of course Music for Big Pink and the band. But really, most of their albums were good. And there wasn't any really bad album. And yeah, no, so like it's a little different. I think in some ways what could be it too is I remember I had a college professor that said usually when a successful band's records start declining is when they change producers because the sound actually is a little different, and that's sort of an interesting thing way to look at it. And when you he said that, I realized, yeah, you do see that with a lot of acts, and I guess that could be somewhat said considering John Simon didn't produce it. That's a possibility, but I think this album did do well in the charts. It's just not thought of as highly as the first two albums. And that's the thing too when you think about it. It's like it's rare, not just now, but just in ever when an artist makes it that their first album is a success. I mean, some artists can get away with it, some artists don't. Sometimes they have to wait till the third or fourth album until it really gets successful. But yeah, no. So that's what I got to say about that. And yeah, and the little colorful cover art. And now we got for their next record, we'll talk about their fourth album, which came out in '71, which was Cahoots. And yeah, I mean, tell you the truth, I think I might like Cahoots a little bit better than Stage Fright. I mean, in some ways, I feel like I like them equally, but Cahoots has a little bit more of a stronger presence when it comes to the type of musical instrumentation. Adds a little bit more of some psychedelic stuff too. Even though this is the early '70s now, we have a little bit of that late '60s style still on some songs. But another thing too is on both of those records, you really kind of really feel their own sound taking more of an approach that you don't really hear as much on the first two records. I think you hear like their own sound becoming more of a thing when it comes to these to Stage Fright and Cahoots, and maybe that's because they had more of a hand in the production and it wasn't just John Simon. But yeah, no. So even like the cover art's interesting. I mean, the funny thing when you look at this cover art, it's the same photo of them in a cartoon form from their second album, and I think like the order of how they were in the second album is like in the photo. Yeah, I think they just misplaced, like how I think because Robbie, I don't know if he was next to Levon. I'd have to get the second record to show the difference. But yeah, this is just a illustration of that second album cover. But there is an actual photo of them on the back, which is just them, with their eyes closed. Yeah, no, coming at so number one for the first track we've got Life is a Carnival. And this is a song that is credited of course to Robertson, but also Rick Danko and Levon Helm, which take the lead on it. And this song was about just like, we were talking more about also too like, the carnival life, the medicine show stuff. This is more focusing on Robertson's childhood, considering that one of his first jobs was when he was 14 and he worked at a carnival and all that. Like the interesting thing too, even kind of going back to like the medicine show stuff of like, if you remember or if you ever watched The Last Waltz, they have this talk where they actually do talk about that. And they mentioned it was called Walcott's Rabbit Foot's Menstrual. And Robertson was saying, like, when you saw like these great 50s acts like Jerry Lee Lewis, Bo Diddley, Elvis, when they would, have this, performance, where they would, shake their leg, or like Chuck Berry doing the duck walk, these type of performance traits came from those minstrel shows. It didn't come out of nowhere or thin air. It was just like, it was local entertainment that has brought, influence as time goes on. Like each entertainment inspires another one. And but when you go to Life as a Carnival, you got a little bit of that carnival sound when you hear it, but you really feel like this whole like real type of it's like kind of a mix of what you could expect when you go to a carnival. And I think that's the thing that's so cool, that this is the first song on the album, because you really do feel this type of big welcome when you enter and you step foot on carnival grounds and all that. And you feel that with like the instrumentation of this, like the bum, boom, bum, and then like yeah, the organ and then the horn section on it as well. Yeah, no, I mean it's just great, when you really hear it. And then oh yeah, Alan Toussaint, he was a big part of the New Orleans sound. He died a few years ago. His I think his birthday or his death day came, or his death date early. I think the day he died, I think his anniversary just came up for that. Because I follow Robbie Robertson on Instagram and he posted about that. Because Alan Toussaint was actually a big even kind of thing, impact on the band's music, especially when it comes to this song. And yeah, no, so yeah, the brass arrangements just work well. The bun, 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 dun, and then yeah, then the horns going dun 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 dun, dun, and then you just hear Levon and Rick go right into the verses. And yeah, they both take the lead. They don't really sing like, one doesn't sing one solo or all that. They just sing together and all that. And their voices really blend well together on this song, because when you think about it, Levon and Rick have completely kind of different, unique vocal styles that's sort of different than, because I feel like Rick sounds similar to Richard. And honestly, tell you the truth, Richard, I think, had this interesting quality where he could sound similar to both Levon and Rick's vocal style. But yeah, when it came to yeah this song, you definitely have a lot of that like both of in sync vocal style. And it just is accompanying the music, but the music really just gets really intense, as they're as the verses, you keep exploring lyrics in the verses, like I got six on each tattoo and on my feet. Yeah. No, no, life is a carnival, believe it or not. But yeah, and then yeah, how they keep going on and on. And it just works well. And yeah, definitely a great opening track. I think one of their best opening tracks of an album, like Tears of Rage. They always had some great opening tracks, like Tears of Rage from Big Pink, Across the Great Divide. This is a really good opening track. And then their second one is a Bob Dylan song, When I Paint My Masterpiece, which is cool because you hear a lot of Garth Hudson's instrumentation on this. With like a lot of like type of like the like accordion, and just it doesn't sound like a rock song, but when you think about it, like the ingredients have what it takes for it. I mean, you got Bob Dylan who wrote the song, and then Levon singing the song. But it doesn't sound like I guess it could be considered, because the band was a rock and roll group. But when you think of this song, it's not really as much rock. It's more a little bit of folk country, but in some ways, it's not even that. It's like a mix. It's a blend of all types of music together of rock, and that's what of course rock is. It's a mix of rockabilly, it's a mix of blues, and it's kind of an interesting type of sound. I mean, it was sort of different, sort of like similar to how when the Beatles did Eleanor Rigby, nobody knew what to expect of that, putting strings on a rock song, in that way, so stuff like that, and yeah, no, all right. So then yeah, so we've got that, and then we've got three of my favorite tracks coming up, and the third one is "Last of the Blacksmiths." And that, like I said, the band had really interesting storytelling, and I think this album really captures the storytelling on this. Because Stage Fright had to feel like a little bit more of like just writing songs to write songs on that. This really has more of a concept of like type of apocalyptic kind of feelings. Just like real like kind of it wasn't stuff like "Oh baby I love you so," it's real like kind of like authentic types of stories that are just like fictional, but like stuff that you could see from movies or comic strips or books. And the piano solo, the piano intro, how it starts like the bum, and then of course yeah, Richard sings the lead on this. And like honestly, I think this is actually one of my favorite Richard Manuel vocals on it, because he just really just takes it away, and you really see like like that's the thing too. I think like your vulnerability when you listen to it, you can hear his vulnerability, as a character. I mean, you really, it's like there was so much I want to know about Richard Manuel, as like how he was able to sing the way he did, how he played the way he did, because I think there's just a lot of like interesting stuff about him as a character. And from what has been said about him is that he was a very sensitive person. He was really like this wounded bird, a very like delicate type of person, and you can tell that in the vocal style. It sounds like that, and it's just really like it's not, of course, it's not a song that's supposed to be beautiful or heartwarming to people, because it is like kind of this concept story of a character. But when you hear it, like his vocal style, he really does add like this type of emotion that like, oh, like where he goes into like, who's the one that has to be saved, and yeah, and also to the piano accompanying him works pretty well. And that's the thing, like I said, I feel like I have a lot of nostalgia myself from listening to the band when I was up at school, away from my family, away from yeah, like the communities that I've known. So being in a different type of area, I think, and listening to this type of music was interesting, developing my own type of comfort and all that, and actually missing that, to tell you the truth. And it really just, walk into class, hearing a song like that, or just yeah, like listening to any of their types of songs, just really brought this type of interesting thing that I really didn't hear before, or never really took time to really listen, or really made the effort. And that's yeah, these songs I think really capture just the incredibility of just the incredible, yeah, like I'm trying to think of like the right word that really kind of captures their type of music. And I think it really in some ways is just nonchalant, just type of music that you really gotta listen to really realize that this is beyond, this is epic. There's something else here, there's something that you hear in here that you're not going to get from other music. And it's a sense of realness, it's a sense of like you know hearing these types of voices that you really feel like a connection with. You can feel it, you can relate it to I mean, whatever. And I think music can do that in general, but when you hear this, you relate these people, and you put these people in your mind as, oh, these were like characters, or this is a type of connection that you realize these guys must have had such a connection. And thinking about it more and more as time goes on, you realize that you just really are growing to love it. And yeah, like I said, I feel like I hear more of a realness in here than I'll hear on any other type of song, or it's but it's different. And then you hear "Where Do We Go From Here," which is a song sung by Rick. And oh yeah, no, like what's great about this is like you're hearing more of Rick Danko's vocals, and he's got this really interesting type of trembling style that worked well on stage fright, and yeah, a little bit raspy, a little like kind of stammering, but yeah, and then the harmonies though. Oh my God. When we talk about the band's harmonies, the vocal style that Helm, Danko, and Manuel were able to do together on this type of record, it just works so well. With all three of them on the chorus, like doing "Where Do We Go From Here?" It's just like when you hear it, it's like, oh, this is just beautiful. It's like and there's a in the documentary, they go back from a 1984 interview with Richard Manuel, which was 2 years before he died, and he talks about that he remembered listening to playbacks in the sessions of when they were doing music for Big Pink, and realized it because they played together for about 8 years at that point, but you know during their sessions of doing their own music, they really discovered their a vocal style that they never really kind of laid kind of dabbled upon really. And when they heard that, I think, or like when you hear them doing that, and really when they really took an effort in that, it's like, oh yeah, it works, and like and Richard Manuel's, I think, expression for that worked pretty well, of how he talked to his reaction when he said, when he listened to that, he was like, I really liked this stuff. And when you hear that song, it's like, that's how I feel like. And when I hear that, I'm like, in those harmonies, it's like, I really like this stuff. And like he was talking about, he's like, I don't have anything else to compare it to. I really like it. I hope everybody else likes it too. And you know what, Richard? Everybody else does. So remember that. Rest in peace. And yeah, then we've got, of course, the fun type of song that you could sing in the bar or wherever, which is 4% Pantomime. And it's not just them on this. They have a featuring artist, which is Van the Man Van Morrison. Which Van the Man, actually, by the way, the expression of the nickname actually came from Robbie Robertson. At like that's like kind of his nickname now, Van the Man. But it didn't start until when Van Morrison appeared with them in the Last Waltz. And I always found it interesting because I love Van Morrison already. And when I saw that he performed with the band, I checked it out, and of course they do Caravan. And yeah, and then I was just like thinking, the band and Van Morrison have this real interesting connection. It would have been interesting to see if they did any more music. So I was just like looking just to see if they did something else together, and I didn't think they would. But I remember looking up, and they had 4% Pantomime, and it was apparently on this record. And he's the only artist really to be featured on a band record, like in a duet style, or really legendary artist to begin with on a band record, or like on a studio album. And yeah, like so Robertson wrote the lyrics. Van Morrison, also because he's songwriter as well, co-wrote this too. But it's sung by of course Van Morrison, but even even Richard Manuel takes the lead on this too. And they go back and forth, and it's really this type of fun song that really was more of like, when you hear more about the creation of it, it was more of a type of improv type of style. And they met Van Morrison around this time, and I think Robbie Robertson was just starting to write like lyrics to a new type of song, so Van Morrison added some stuff to it. And then when they recorded it, unfortunately, we never saw a live performance of them doing it, like or any video performance of them doing it, because that would have been cool. Because apparently, when they were recording it, Richard Manuel and Van Morrison were really acting it out. Levon Helm talked about it, that like they were really like getting into the character. They were like standing up, making such a scene. And I think after, I think Richard Manuel, drove into, like, I think he got into an accident or something like that, or he hit like Van Morrison's foot or something like that. But yeah, no, Anyway, the funny thing was, yeah, like when you hear the song, they're just like calling out to each other because like Richard sings the first verse, and then Van just introduces himself by doing, "Oh, Richard, tell me if it's spoken," and then Richard calls him Belfast Cowboy, which was a nickname Robbie Robertson had for Van Morrison. Of course, 'cause he's Irish. If you don't know by now, if you don't know now, now you do. But yeah, no. So and the reason why the name 4% Pantomime came about was they were moving around like doing this type of mime and thing like a pantomime, and also too, so that's how that came apart. And then the 4% part came in with the alcohol that's mentioned in the song Johnny Walker Red, which is apparently like if you look at it, it's like it's got like 4% type of alcohol. I think it says on the bottle. So that's how 4% Pantomime came about. And it's interesting how like this type of improv song became a real type of interesting song that just worked. And it would have been cool if they did it live or there was more performances of the song. There's an outtake of them doing it, a few takes. How like even Van Morrison sings some of the verses that Richard sings on the final version. But yeah, no, I love this song and I'm glad it made the album. And then we got Shootout in Chinatown, which when we talk about, yeah, like Levon, Richard, and Rick all taking turns at singing vocals and all that. That's what works well with them. They all three sing on this song. Just like a characters, just talking about these characters about this issue of trouble on the waterfront, eagle in the air when the town patrol came down to take a little order there. And like even the music, the intro starts too, like yeah, like with a little bit of like that organ style, like bum 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 bum. Yeah, like those high keys, real like big, yeah, you have a little bit of even that like kind of funk there too. And yeah, so it's got like kind of a funk type of style. It really, when you hear the instrumentation, I think what works well of their sound was they really felt like type of movie type songs, like a real type of impact, and like and that's how you feel of it. And like they all three do a good job at taking a lead on the song, and that's what I love. Like I love the songs where they all three sing on together. I mean, it's great when they have a song that's just done by just one of them. But when they all three sing together, there's just something that they that like they add that they can't get alone. If you know what I mean. And then we've got the Moonstruck One, which is another Richard song, and where he just sings that in such a beautiful type ballad. And it was the B-side to Life is a Carnival. And yeah, and it's got a very moody type feeling in it, especially with the piano. Even like a little bit of like a horn section, a little bit, or like yeah, like you hear this little like yeah, like it's like synthesizer or something like that might be what it is. But yeah, I'd really have to like dissect it. I wish that I could like react to more music, on stuff, but I don't want to get copyrighted. I don't know, like how they are when it comes to copyright stuff, because it is weird with reaction videos. You can do some stuff and be fine with it, of course, if you're not making any money or doing any commercial use, and all that. But but it is cool. It would be interesting to like really like, kind of dissect their songs, and really just even dissect their album live. Talking about it. But yeah, no, this is another. It's not my favorite. I mean, not to say it's not my favorite Richard Manuel song. It's just not a song that I always think of when I think of the best Richard Manuel songs. But it does work. He has a very like soft style of singing on this, so that works as well. And then we got Thinking Out Loud. It's not an Ed Sheeran song. It's done by Rick Danko. He sings this one. Like I said, he's got more of a folk style type of voice, so that's really heard on this album. The same with like kind of Volcano, but Volcano takes a little bit more of a rhythm and blues aspect, so you hear him kind of going more into that, and you hear a little bit more of his soul coming out on that song. And the instrumentation is very heavy on that. And then, before we finish and wrap up, let's talk about the two last songs, which is the last song on the album, which is the River Hymn. And the River Hymn is not like my favorite, but it's very like kind of like a soft type of maybe gospel style that Levon sings. And his wife at the time, her partner, Libby Titus, sang on that, who actually later ended up marrying Donald Fagen from Steely Dan. But yeah, she's on that. yeah, like I think she's on the backing vocals on that song, and yeah, it's a nice type of uplifting song. I'd have to, I'll tell you the truth, I have to listen to it more and more to really like kind of see if I really love it or if it's one of my favorites. But let's wrap this up with the I think it was the let's see, it was the oh yeah, it was the ninth song on this album, which is Smoke Signal. And I've talked about that it has a little bit of a psychedelic feel, and this is where you have like a little of that psychedelic late '60s feel, kind of Vietnam War vibes, coming to because still the Vietnam War was pretty, a hot topic still, hot topic in early 1971 still. Yeah, so you just hear the heavy instrumentation with the drums really you can hear them really well on here, the guitar, and then Levon's voice just captures the whole thing, and even with some of the harmonies from Danko and Manuel too. But yeah, no, and it actually, because Cahoots, there's no song called Cahoots, but the word Cahoots is in one of the verses where it's like young brothers joining Cahoots, so that's how you realize, oh, that's how they got the name of this album. And because I remember like I listened to it a second time and I didn't know that Cahoots was used in the song, and I realized like, oh, okay, I'm like, oh, that makes sense now, yeah. Young brothers joining Cahoots about a smoke signal. And Robbie Robertson talked about the song because it's not like their most well-known song. It's a very underrated, I think, band track when you think of it, and a very obscure song. But Robbie Robertson talks about that his favorite version of it is, I had to look it up, is there's a live version of them doing it, and it's out there somewhere. And he said that is probably the best version of that song that they did. He thinks it's way better than the studio version. So I would definitely have to check that out. And boom, we hit an hour. All right. So that's really what I gotta say about this stuff. Of course, like I said, the band's most well known for their first two albums, but I've listened to all of their albums. I like them all. When it comes to Stage Fright, Cahoots, their cover album, which was covering 50 songs, Moondog Matinee, which I think I actually am gonna review eventually one of these days. And same with and they have their album Northern Lights, Southern Cross, which is also actually that's looked highly upon because it's got like their song Ophelia and It Makes No Difference on it. Which was a few kind of well-known band songs. That's of course featured in the last waltz too. And then their last album, which was Islands, which isn't thought that highly of, but I actually, to tell you the truth, love Islands. I really like that album because Robbie Robertson talked about that when it came out. It wasn't really something they looked that highly upon. It was just basically a record obligation album because they need one, even though it looked like they were going to break up or they weren't playing him in live performances, they needed one more album to do, so they just kind of like came across like studio outtakes and songs that they never released on an album and kind of just put it on one. And it worked for me. I think the album works smoothly, and it's one of my favorites. And I think I'm actually gonna review that too. My dad actually has the album on vinyl, so we might talk about it. It's got a Christmas song on there, and considering it's almost Christmas time, this might be a good time to talk about the album. Yeah, no. So that's it. Thank you for anybody who stopped by. If anybody's a fan of the band, comment. If you're not and you learned something for it, comment below. Or if you just want to comment anything, I guess you can do that too. Yeah, no. So thank you guys. See you guys in the next video. Remember to hit that thumbs up, hit that bell notification, and hit that subscribe button. Thank you guys, and see you guys in the next live stream or video. Bye.